sign and then we can start.
We can start.
Hello, this is Hugo Dart with the BRAZ-TESOL Intercultural Language Education SIG, and I'm here with Mina Patel, who has just delivered a wonderful plenary to close this day. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas with us.
Absolutely fine. It's a pleasure for me to be here, actually, in Bologna. So it's been an amazing conference, and I'm very happy to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Now, in the Intercultural Language Education SIG, we are always looking at how connecting with different cultures and learning from different cultures can be helpful to us as teachers and to students, and how we can learn from them and how we can empower students by enhancing their intercultural communicative competence. Now, as you are telling us so much about assessment, and you yourself, of course, have a great deal of intercultural experience, what would you say is the role of intercultural awareness in assessment? How can it help us, or how does it inform how we see assessment?
Okay, I think that's a really good question, thank you. But I'm going to take us a step back if that's all right, because I think there is a role for intercultural competence, let's say, in assessment, but before that happens, we have to think about intercultural competence in teaching and learning. What does it mean? What does it mean for students? Now, the whole idea of intercultural competence has come around because we do live in a multilingual society and a multicultural society. And one of the things that the British Council works towards is towards peace and prosperity. Now, if we're going to help our learners become global citizens, they need to understand how other cultures work. They need to empathise with experiences, with social norms, with values, and if we don't help them with that in the classroom, then I think we are doing them a disservice. But then, when you have an intercultural classroom, it makes the whole dynamic very, very different, because what you're doing is you're opening the classroom up, you're breaking down the walls of the classroom. The classroom becomes the country, the region, the world. And I think that's phenomenal. So that's from a teaching and learning point of view. And I think that's really important. And I think it's enriching and it's empowering. Because the more you know about the people that you are in constant contact with, the more empowered you are. In terms of assessment, so going back to your question, I think it goes back to what I was saying about localization. I think it's about personalizing assessment, making it contextually relevant. So if I have a class with 3 or 4 nationalities, how can I bring in assessment practices to help nurture and cultivate that intercultural competence? Now, the end of year test or the end of term test may not have that in it. But that doesn't mean that intercultural competence doesn't matter, because it has a massive, massive value in the whole teaching and learning process.
Absolutely. Oh yes, that makes total sense. And if I could just ask you, in your experience traveling to different countries, and of course you have seen how assessment takes place in a lot of different contexts, to what degree do you believe that cultural differences influence how people look at assessment? Because of course we do have standards that we are taught, we do have the old concepts, we have the separation between formative and summative, but perhaps it can't help but being colored by cultural aspects, right?
I think that's a really good question. It's a really interesting way to look at it. I think when we say something is coloured by something, it sometimes has negative connotations. However, I think that if we ignore the cultural aspect and the cultural perceptions of assessment, I think, again, we're missing a trick, because cultures do have different expectations. We aren't all the same. Right? So the way that you approach assessment in Brazil, I imagine, though I don't know because I don't know enough about Brazil, it's very different to the way assessment is approached in Malaysia, for example. And I think there are cultures who put a lot of importance on scores, on achievement, where there are other cultures who put more importance on the process of learning and development. But, you know, I think both are important. And I think what the teacher has to decide almost on a daily basis is what kind of assessment am I going to give importance to today based on the objectives of what I'm going to teach. So I think culture has a big role to play. I think it's important and shouldn't be ignored.
Right.
But really, when we talk about formative and we talk about summative, I think, as I said in my plenary, both of them have to work together.
Sure.
Regardless of the cultural context that you sit in.
Of course. You did bring up a very interesting example from an institutional standpoint when you talked about how the CFR has been somewhat adapted in Japan. Now that's remarkable and I think very surprising to most of us here, because one thinks of the CFR as this one standard that is applied worldwide, and that so many of us, and I think perhaps more and more so, look at as a reliable, I wouldn't say objective, but a really reliable reference. But even that.
Well, I think that the fact that Japan took the CFR and made it their own is a testimony to its reliability. But the CFR is European, right? It's a European framework.
Absolutely.
And that's not to say it doesn't work in other contexts or in other countries. I think, for me, Japanese were really brave. They took it and said, you know what, we really like this. We understand how it works and we understand its usefulness. We're going to make it our own.
Right.
And I think that's such a big step to take, a brave step to take.
Sure.
So I think it's not that the CFR doesn't work in the way it is right now. I think they've just adapted it. Like you would say, for example, when you go to a training session, right? And the trainers tell you all of these wonderful ideas that work in different contexts. And as a teacher, you think about them and you think, you know what, when I go back to my classroom, that and that's going to work for me, but you know, I'm going to have to change that, and that. That's just what Japan did with the CFR.
It's fascinating.
It's great. I love it.
And I'm so grateful. So on behalf of all of us, the Intercultural Language Education SIG, all of BRAZ-TESOL, all of us here, thank you so much for your generosity, for sharing your ideas with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the interview and thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
It is our pleasure.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.